I'm a firm believer in a service business, you need to own your local. You want to dominate your local market and keep the competition out. So to do that, you have to invest the time and energy in the local community. You're not just going to, stick an open banner outside and have them flood in. You have to work it, and long term, it pays off.
Hey, Jason, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Anytime. So we're currently recording in Costa Rica. We're actually in the house, just in different rooms. And I wanted to have Jason back on the show because we had a really cool conversation the other day. And I wanted to share it with you, talking about how Jason built his business and how different it is now in 2022 compared to when you built it. And I kind of pose this question to you, what would you do if you didn't have a business right now, but you could start over completely from scratch? What would you do differently? How would you structure the business? And I wanted to hear from you and share that with our listeners.
All right. Well, when I started my company in 2007, it was a different world. Google pay-per-click advertising was new on the scene. Um, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in yellow page advertising, and most of your listeners have never looked through the yellow pages. I don't
That's
even
true.
they even stopped producing these things, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, legal fights, long-term lawsuits over it, and guaranteed calls. Yellow page salespeople were the snake oil salespeople of the late '90s, early 2000s. Um, and it's just the world has changed so much since then. It's amazing. But when looking at what I did, and again, I built something very successfully in Budget Dry. We're approaching about over 40 million, maybe more now in gross sales. Um, we've 16 years, currently 22 employees. Um, over those 16 years, I've provided for hundreds of families through our work, our contractors, and actually, if you expand that to our vendors, we're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of families I've provided for in that time. So by no means what I'm saying is I did something wrong. Um, I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to see people grow. Now, that said, if I had to start from scratch today with my bankroll, and I started Budget Dry with my credit card. I was 22 with an Amex, and I think a $7,500 limit. And I bootstrap financed this whole thing. Um, fake it till you make it. I did the work myself, starting at 7 a.m., going to 2 a.m. every day. So things would be a little different now. I can't put those hours in anymore. I'm an old man. You can see all the grays I got from this. Um, but things I've learned, an industry with higher barriers to entry is good. You don't need them to be so high to be completely restrictive. I'm not going into oil and gas exploration where I need millions of dollars in equipment and mineral rights and such. But in my industry, all you need is a phone, and you're supposed to mail a check to the state to get a contractor's license. And the state doesn't, I've learned later, doesn't even enforce that. So some sort of barrier to entry would be crucial. I mean, every rainstorm that we would get, any guy with a pickup truck became a waterproofer. And bottom of the barrel prices, and I never competed to be the cheapest option. But when an option is so ridiculously inexpensive that it makes the reasonable work look astronomically high, customers choose not to proceed. So some sort of barrier to entry in what I've done would have been helpful. Um, and they exist in all sorts of industries, whether it's a license that requires an apprenticeship, if it's just a business license, ideally something that's enforced, if you need certain levels of expertise to do what you do, all of that is crucial to differentiating yourself and making it a little bit harder for your competition.
Yeah.
The other thing is how the world has changed so drastically. I mean, I currently spend 15,000 a month in pay per click. When I started Budget Dry, we could buy a keyword. A keyword now that's costing up to $60 a click was, $1.20. My monthly SEO or pay per click was $500. I can spend. I mean, I'm spending 15. I could spend 65 right now. There's no limit to the max spend. That's definitely something different. That's also something I would focus on. But because those costs for acquisition can get so astronomical in the PPC world, you have to do more. Um, I would today I would invest my time in vlogging. I don't know if that's still the term or a pod. I'm not a podcast person. I don't listen to podcasts. I can't do it. I'm a reader still. I'm old school. But people want short videos, reels, YouTube. All the work that I did to educate a consumer in being interviewed for print magazines and print newspapers. I mean, I've got how many of those framed up in my office where I was the expert giving opinions on things. I would put that time and energy into videos, short videos. I would do short videos from the job sites. I would have my employees doing short videos from the job site. I have a product that really does not make for good before and afters. Bilco doors, yes, because you're replacing something that's rusting and falling apart with new painted material. But basement waterproofing, it's a basement when we start, it's a basement when we finish.
Yeah.
Your before and after suck. But yeah, and again, my media, all my advertising was built with still images. So we have a picture of a wet basement, we have a picture of a dry basement. If water doesn't photograph well when it's a little puddle. Um, Even bringing in and spending thousands for a professional photographer is still awful visuals. Video during the process is key in any industry. Just show people what to expect, show them the process, answer their questions about what they should see, feel, experience before they ask them.
Definitely. And
So
the
I would do that differently.
problem, yeah, you were talking about, this was an interesting thing that you mentioned. The problem is fleeting. So you mentioned that when the customer feels the problem, they feel the problem and they're seeking a solution, but the problem can go away and then they forget about that pain point. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So in selling basement waterproofing, we have to sell the pain and the reminders of the pain. Remember that time your basement flooded? How did you get that water out of your basement? Oh, boy, who carried those buckets up the stairs? Your back must have been killing. Are your knees okay? Yeah, you drive people, remind them back to that pain point. If I were to start again, and waterproofing is fleeting, that water's there, it's not there. It doesn't come back until Mother Nature makes it. Something like HVAC, however, this is probably the industry that I'd focus on because the average age of an HVAC technician is about 57 years old, I read nationally. There's nobody in the pipeline for it. You're not going to outsource your furnace repair to China or India. Um, and everybody has heating and cooling. Only 20% of homes have wet basements. Every home has a furnace or an air conditioner, period. So you have to look for a bigger market. I went a little too niche, I feel.
And
So
that discomfort doesn't
the
go away if it's not working.
exactly the pain stays. If it's 100 degrees and you have no AC and it is humid, you remember that. You remember how uncomfortable you are. You remember how miserable your kids are and how miserable they made you. And you're willing to pay to get it done now. In winter, the heating system goes out. You're concerned immediately about frozen pipes. There's the risk there of carbon monoxide and death if you don't address something. There's no risk of death ever with a wet basement until it gets 8 feet deep. So, yeah, there's more pain, there's more immediacy, and there's a lot more urgency to remediate that pain.
That makes sense. And the other one we were talking about was, I think, along with that, that the fact that the pain point is fleeting, that makes it challenging to have like repeat customers or a customer lifetime value that's high, right? You've managed to mitigate that, and I want you to expand on it, but that makes it hard because you come in, you solve the problem, right?
Right, and it came from the industry started when I was in it. That we never went back to a customer. That we sold a product, we sold it once, and that was it. I was visiting my best friend in LA. We were smoking cigars poolside, and he asked me, "What is your lifetime value of a customer?" And I said, at the time, my average job was $6,500, and I said that. And he said, "That's it?" I said, "Yeah." I may sell them a pump down the road, $450, $500, and pumps last 8, 10 years. So, by that point, they sell the home, and I'm on to customer number two, and there we go. Because the average person's in a house 7 years. He was working in medical device industry and specifically insulin pumps at the time. And his company knew, depending on your age, to the penny, how much money you would be paying them over the course of your life for their supplies. Once they got their teeth into you, or literally his pump into you, they knew exactly how much money you were worth to them. And that was eye opening. So I went back and I started a service plan where we would go back and see people and do preventative work, just getting back in the house and opportunities to sell more, to sell different products, also catch issues and problems before they become things that affect your customer reviews and you want to keep that referral pipeline functioning. But convincing people that haven't seen water since you did the work or haven't experienced the pain that you need to spend an average of $300 or $278 a year to to keep that pain from ever potentially coming back is tricky. People are conditioned to have their furnaces and air conditioners tuned up, once per season. So once for the heating season, once for the cooling season. And that's a big part of that industry. And having the mechanism, the mousetrap in place to make that happen uh, is crucial. But you want to get that reoccurring value or lifetime value of the customer.
So would you say that if you were to start over again, you would choose a different, type of business that was easier to have recurring revenue for, or some type of other model?
100%. Reoccurring revenue is more profitable. There's less pushback, less customer frustration and issues, less issues with staff, um, and it's easier to also generate referrals from reoccurring customers versus chasing new customers.
And I always say it's better to give them as little sales decisions as possible. So if you have to sell them multiple times, it's more challenging than selling them once and then they essentially auto pay, or they're part of a membership or subscription until they initiate a cancellation. I found that to be a lot easier, and that's what I always tell clients too. How can you make it easier for them to decide once to buy from you and not have to decide every single time?
Authorize.net.
Mhm.
When I built my service program, I went to reoccurring charges like a gym membership, Netflix membership.
Yep.
And I was the only person in the industry doing this at the time. We would put you on an auto pay. I broke it out to a monthly payment because rather than trying to get the check, a bigger check from a retired old lady with living off a fixed income, it's easier to get a few dollars a month. Broke it out that way. So if you prepay, it's a ten month value. So say let's throw out there 1999, 1990 a month or 1995, whatever it was. So it'd be 199.50 a year, or you get the extra 2 months if they do a reoccurring charges. You factor the 2.2% credit card fee into your pricing, and you work with it, and you get that money. And it's always best to get the money now rather than wait for something.
I totally agree with that. When it comes to the hypothetical of starting over again, is there anything you would do sooner or later, or a person you would hire sooner or later than you actually did when you were running Budget Dry?
So, because marketing has evolved so much and has changed so much, and it's so constant, you need to be on top of that. Whereas I was able to buy my advertising for the year. I had a schedule. I'd spend the time to develop the ad, and yes, I handled that all, but it was done once and it was set for the schedule. Even TV ads, you film them, you have your runs, you have the ad in the can, and you just pick where it goes. You invest the time in the beginning to generate the ad, and then you're set. Social media is a constant change and evolution. You need to be on top of that all the time. And so I would have to 100% hire somebody to focus on that rather than the current approach of just a few posts per week type deal that I have.
That makes sense. And you've marketed yourself as a family business, as a community, having a presence in the town. I'm assuming you would keep that approach and have that presence with the chamber, the Lions. I know you've been super involved in the town locally. Would you change anything about that or do the same thing, go harder on it? Tell me.
I I believe I'm a firm believer in a service business. You need to own your local. You want to dominate your local market and keep the competition out. So to do that, you have to invest the time and energy in the local community. You're not just going to stick an open banner outside and have them flood in. You have to work it, and long term, it pays off.
Yeah. What about home shows and physical, trade shows and things like that? How has that factored in and has it changed?
We used to do 50, 75 shows a year. I'd be at 3 different shows a weekend. Um, Now I do 2, 3 a year, and if that, I'm debating even going back. COVID changed that whole landscape. Um, so it was a great revenue source. I know for some of my industry, or I'd say home service industry, it still does work, but no, I would focus that money again. That money that I spent when you're paying 2,500, 3 grand just to have the booth location for 3 days. Invest that money in somebody to do the social media marketing.
Would you do like paid ads on social media, short form video, paid ads?
Yes, yes,
Makes sense.
definitely. Again, you have to build your community. You have to have engaged people. You need people to have that relationship. I've been afraid to post on social media as a business owner. It's no matter what I say, I'm going to offend half the population, minimum. So I just kept my mouth shut. I used to be a funny person, but I don't do that in public anymore.
Well, yeah. It's tough with social media. Everyone has a comment, everyone has an opinion. Especially the local groups I found our hometown. There's just a lot of conversations happening on the Facebook pages. It's hard to share any positivity or make a joke or anything like that. So I agree.
COVID changed the landscape, and there are so many more assholes now than there were before.
I agree. I think everyone has just gone into survival defensive. Everyone is uptight. It's a weird. shift that happened, but I've just noticed a really different, tone in the air.
Mhm.
So, Jason, what other pieces of advice, if someone were starting a business today, similar to yours, maybe it's more of a physical presence, in-person service, right? If they were starting a business like yours today, what would be your first 2 or 3 pieces of advice to them if you could hand that off?
Go with the wrapped vehicles. It makes a huge difference in the sales force and professionalism if you show up in a wrapped vehicle. They're a lot more common than when I first did mine, and I've wrapped over 20, 25 vehicles at this point. So it makes a huge difference when you pull up to the customer's home.
And what's
Uh,
on the wrap, because yours is pretty cool. Can you tell our listeners why your wrap is really cool?
we made a desert scene, or developed a desert scene for it, and it says we make basement this dry. Um, and if you look closely on the back of the rear bumper of our cars, it's a cactus, but it's also kind of giving the finger.
And I happen to know that people will even text me or text you and say, I saw your van on the highway. I saw your van here and there. Like, they'll send pictures of your vehicles to you because they're recognizable. And I think that was brilliant. I'm sure that was the intention. It was super fun because it actually goes along with a lot of the scenes and the artwork that we like, but it's such a brilliant idea to contrast.
Again, being out there and being noticeable, you appear larger than you are too. Everyone
Totally.
always sees your van, so we see it everywhere. Be the same guy driving around, but they see
Yeah.
it everywhere. Therefore, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
And then again, embrace technology. We've really made efforts to document everything that we do. We have service records that the guys make on iPad. They deliver photos to the customer. We back up everything. We keep records of the conversations. We've moved to a lot of text-based follow-up, which to your average listener, like, well, you're just moving to that. But when your market is traditionally folks over 55, um, getting them to adopt and evolve. Yeah, we still get the snarky comments because not people don't feel that's professional, but it's easier to get the response. So embrace the technology, and I mean, texting's not the last of it. There'll be something else that comes along, whether it's FaceTiming consultations or other things. Something else will come along that we'll have to embrace.
Yeah. And you'll be ready for it because you've been adopting. I say you're definitely an early adopter in your industry.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt.
Thank you so much, Jason, for jumping on the show again and sharing all that with our listeners. I love being able to share with you all the conversations that Jason has and the knowledge he has and shares with me. And it's exciting to hear a different perspective than someone, who has a digital business or service based or, relatively simple to set up. And you have a very different, type of business that is still in person, service based, local. And a lot of those concepts really do relay into any type of business.
Yes, I've got probably $1 million in just vehicles. Never mind tools and inventory.
Yeah.
It's the world has changed so much. You can start a business a lot less these days.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, if you haven't started the business yet because you're afraid of the investment or the commitment or anything, just know that Jason was able to do that. How old were you again when you started Budget Dry?
22 with an operating or an opening balance of 9 grand. Made this work.
And here we are. Was it 16 years later?
16 years and 40 million later.
Amazing. Yeah, you can do it. Thank you, Jason, for coming on the show. I can't wait to have you back on again.
All right. Thank you. Take care.